The gunshot that killed Theresa Zimmerman's father didn't echo like they said it would in the dime novels. It just cracked once, and then left a silence, so heavy she thought the whole world had stopped breathing. She stood in the doorway of their small ranch house outside Hangtown, California, in the summer of 1878, watching three men ride away while her father lay crumpled in the dirt, blood spreading dark across his chest. She was 22 years old and suddenly alone in a world that didn't care much for women without protection or prospects. The ranch hands had scattered the moment the gunmen arrived, and now even the chickens seemed to sense the change, clucking nervously in their pen as if they knew their feed might not come regular anymore. Theresa buried her father on the hill overlooking the property he'd worked his whole life to build. Just a modest spread with 30 head of cattle and a house that leaked when it rained. She dug the grave herself because she couldn't afford to pay anyone, and her hands blistered and bled until she couldn't feel them anymore. The preacher from town came out and said a few words, but she barely heard them. All she could think about was what came next. Her father had debts, she knew that much. The men who killed him had been collecting, and they'd be back for the land now that he couldn't pay. 3 days after the funeral, Theresa sat at the kitchen table trying to make sense of her father's ledger. Numbers swam before her eyes, columns that didn't add up no matter how many times she recalculated them. She'd never been good with figures. Her father had always said she was smart enough, just never applied herself to practical things. He'd said it kindly, but she'd heard the disappointment underneath. She couldn't cook worth a damn, couldn't sew a straight seam, couldn't charm people the way her mother had before the fever took her 10 years back. She was plain-faced and plain-spoken, with brown hair that wouldn't hold a curl and a figure too thin to be fashionable. The few young men in Hangtown who'd come courting had lost interest quick once they realized she had no talent for the things that made a good wife. The sound of hoofbeats brought her head up. She rose slowly, wiping her palms on her worn calico dress, and went to the window. A single rider approached, sitting easy in the saddle like a man who'd spent more of his life on horseback than on his own 2 feet. He was tall. She could see that even from a distance, with dark hair that needed cutting and a hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. He rode right up to the house and dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of long practice. Theresa grabbed her father's old rifle from beside the door, checked that it was loaded, and stepped out onto the porch. She held the gun loose but ready, not quite pointing it at the stranger but making it clear she could if needed. The man stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and slowly raised his hands to show they were empty. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried an accent she couldn't quite place, somewhere from the south maybe. "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then state your business and move along," Theresa said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Name's Yates Jackson," he said. "I worked for your father about 5 years back before I moved on to try my luck in the silver mines up north. Heard in town what happened. Came to pay my respects." Theresa studied him. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a weathered face that suggested he'd lived hard but eyes that were surprisingly gentle. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that looked well used but not fancy. Not a hired killer, she thought. Those men dressed better. "You paid them," she said. "You can go." "Madam, I also heard you were out here alone," Yates said. He lowered his hands slowly. "A woman alone on a ranch with debts is a dangerous situation. I'm offering my services if you'll have them. I'm a fair hand with cattle and I can fix most anything that breaks. I'll work for room and board until you get yourself sorted out." "I can't pay you," Theresa said flatly. "Didn't ask you to." "Why would you do that?" Yates looked at her for a long moment. "Your father gave me a job when I needed one. Didn't ask questions about where I'd been or what I'd done. Taught me how to handle cattle proper. I figure I owe him that debt, and since he's not here to collect, I'll pay it to you." Theresa wanted to say no. Pride demanded it. But pride didn't fix fences or feed cattle or keep creditors at bay. "There's a bunk in the barn," she said finally. "Meals are at sunup and sundown. They won't be fancy." "I'm not a fancy man," Yates said, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He was true to his word. For the next week, Yates worked from dawn until well past dusk, mending fences that had gone to rot, checking on the cattle, fixing the leak in the roof that Theresa had been living with for months. He moved with an easy efficiency, never wasting motion, never complaining. At meals he ate whatever she put in front of him without comment, even though Theresa knew her cooking was barely edible. She burned the biscuits and oversalted the beans and once served him stew that was still half raw in the middle. He ate it all and thanked her politely every time. On the 8th day, Theresa was hanging laundry when she heard a commotion from the barn. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and hurried over to find Yates wrestling with one of the horses. A mean-tempered gelding her father had called Satan for good reason. The horse was trying its level best to kick Yates's head in, but Yates held firm to the lead rope, speaking in a low, steady voice that Theresa couldn't quite make out. She stood in the barn doorway and watched as, slowly, the horse stopped fighting. Its ears came forward and it took a tentative step toward Yates, who reached out and stroked its nose. The horse, which had never let anyone but her father near it, stood calm as a lamb under Yates's hand. "How did you do that?" Theresa asked. Yates glanced over at her. "Just got to show them you're not afraid and you're not going to hurt them. Most animals respond to kindness if you're patient enough. My father could never get him to settle like that. Your father was a good man, but he believed in breaking a horse's spirit. I prefer to work with it." Yates gave the horse a final pat and came toward her. "You need something?" "No, I just—" Theresa trailed off. She'd been about to say she'd heard the noise and got worried, but that sounded foolish, like she cared what happened to him. "I was hanging laundry. Need help?" "I can manage laundry," she said, more sharply than she intended. It came out defensive, prickly, the way everything she said seemed to lately. Yates held up his hands. "Didn't mean to suggest otherwise, madam." Theresa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap, it's just. Everyone's always implying I can't do things, that I'm not capable." "Are they?" Yates leaned against the barn wall, studying her with those steady eyes. "Or are you hearing criticism that's not being said?" The observation stung because it was probably true. "I'm not good at much," Theresa said. "I can't cook, can't sew, can't keep books, can't charm anyone, can't even keep a horse calm. I don't know what I'm good at, if anything." "You buried your father by yourself," Yates said quietly. "You're holding on to this ranch when most people would have given up and gone to live with relatives. You haven't fallen apart, even though you got every reason to. That takes strength most people don't have." "That's not a talent," Theresa said. "That's just stubbornness. Sometimes there's not much difference between the two." Yates pushed off from the wall. "I should get back to work. Those fence posts in the north pasture won't set themselves." He walked past her, and Theresa stood there feeling unbalanced, like the conversation had shifted something inside her that she couldn't quite name. She went back to the laundry, but her hands moved automatically while her mind churned. That evening, she tried to make something better for supper. She really tried, but the chicken came out dry as sawdust, and the potatoes were somehow both burnt and undercooked. She set the plates on the table with a heavy feeling of failure. Yates sat down and picked up his fork. He took a bite of chicken, chewed thoughtfully, and then said, "You know, I've been thinking." "About what?" Theresa asked, not touching her own food. "About what you said earlier, about not having talents." He took another bite, swallowed. I think you're wrong about that. Oh. She couldn't keep the bitter edge from her voice. What talent do I have that I don't know about? Yates looked at her directly, his eyes serious. You're talented at making me want to be better. Theresa blinked. What? It's true, he said. Every day I'm here, I want to work harder, do more, fix things up nicer. Not because you're demanding it or because I owe your father. Because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves to be around someone with your kind of strength. That's a rare thing, Theresa. That's a gift. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She sat frozen, her heart doing something strange in her chest. That's ridiculous, she finally managed. How can another person's choices be my talent? How can they not be? Yates asked. The best people I've ever known were the ones who made everyone around them rise up to meet them. Your father was like that. You're like that too, even if you don't see it. Theresa shook her head, but something warm was unfurling inside her, something that felt dangerously close to hope. You're just being kind. I'm being honest. Yates returned to his meal, apparently considering the subject closed. They ate in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. More comfortable somehow. Like something had been acknowledged that couldn't be taken back. 2 days later, the creditors came. There were 3 of them, the same men who'd killed her father. They rode up to the house in broad daylight, brazen as anything, and Theresa met them on the porch with her rifle. Yates came from the barn, walking slow and easy, his hand resting on his gun. Miss Zimmerman, the leader said. He was a thick-necked man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. We've come about your father's debt. My father is dead, Theresa said. You made sure of that. That's a serious accusation, the man said, though he didn't deny it. We're here on legitimate business. Your father owed $2,000. The ranch is worth maybe $1,500 if we're generous. We're willing to take the property and call the debt settled. No, Theresa said. You don't have a choice, girl. The debt is legal and binding. You got 1 week to come up with the money or vacate the premises. The debt died with my father, Theresa said, though she had no idea if that was legally true. The man smiled, showing yellow teeth. That's not how it works. The debt passes to his heirs. That's you, 1 week. He started to turn his horse, but Yates spoke up. You got paperwork on that debt. The 3 men turned to look at him as if noticing him for the first time. Who the hell are you? The leader asked. Ranch hand, Yates said. And I'm asking if you got legal paperwork showing the debt and showing it transfers to Miss Zimmerman. We don't need to show you nothing. Then you don't have it, Yates said, which means you're trying to steal this land through intimidation. That won't work while I'm here. The leader's eyes narrowed. You want to be careful, boy. Men who get in our way tend to have accidents. I've survived worse than you, Yates said, and there was something in his voice, something cold and hard that made even the leader pause. 1 week, you said. That gives us time to get a lawyer up from Sacramento to look at your claim. If it's legitimate, Miss Zimmerman will settle it legal. If it's not, you'll be the ones with problems. The standoff lasted another few seconds. Then the leader spat in the dirt. 1 week, he repeated, and the 3 men rode off. Theresa waited until they were out of sight before she let out the breath she'd been holding. We don't have money for a lawyer. I know, Yates said, but they don't know that. And even if the debt is real, we bought ourselves time to figure something out. There's nothing to figure out, Theresa said. The hopelessness was crushing. I don't have $2,000. I don't have $200. I'll lose everything. Yates turned to look at her. How much do you have? Maybe $100. If I sell everything that's not nailed down. The cattle might bring in some money, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Then we need to find a way to make money fast, Yates said. There's a cattle drive heading north to Oregon next month. They're always looking for hands. The pay is good if you make it all the way. I can't leave the ranch unattended for weeks. You won't be. I'll go. You stay here and hold down the property. Theresa stared at him. You do that. Risk your life on a cattle drive for money that would go to saving my ranch. I told you I'd help you get sorted out, Yates said simply. This is helping. But why? The question burst out of her. You don't owe me anything. You barely knew my father. Why are you doing this? Yates was quiet for a long moment, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Because for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, he said finally. Because I wake up every morning and I have a reason to get up. Because you make me want to be better than I've been. That's worth fighting for. Something in Theresa's chest cracked open. Before she could think better of it, she crossed the distance between them and threw her arms around him. He stiffened in surprise, then slowly brought his arms up to hold her. He smelled like horse and leather and honest sweat, and Theresa felt safer than she had since her father died. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. You're welcome, Yates said quietly, and his hand came up to rest gently against her hair. They stood like that for a long moment before Theresa pulled back, suddenly embarrassed by her forwardness. I should get back to work, she said. Me too, Yates agreed, but he was looking at her differently now, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Over the next 3 days, Yates prepared to leave for the cattle drive while Theresa tried to hold things together at the ranch. She found herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, noticing things she hadn't paid attention to before. The way he moved with unconscious grace. The way he was patient with the animals. The way he never made her feel small or incapable, even when she failed at basic tasks. On the 3rd evening, she was attempting to mend one of her dresses when Yates came in from his work. She'd been stabbing at the fabric with a needle for 20 minutes and had only managed to make the tear worse. Having trouble? Yates asked. I can't sew, Theresa said, throwing the dress down in frustration. Add it to the list of things I'm useless at. Yates picked up the dress and examined the tear. To her surprise, he sat down, pulled a needle and thread from his saddlebag, and began to mend it with quick, neat stitches. Where did you learn to do that? Theresa asked. Trail life, Yates said, not looking up from his work. You either learn to fix your own clothes or you go naked. I picked up a lot of skills that way. Doesn't make me special, just makes me practical. I wish I was practical, Theresa said quietly. Yates looked up at her. You know what I think? I think you've spent so long being told what you can't do that you never figured out what you can do. You're so busy failing at other people's expectations that you haven't found your own strengths. Like what? Like your stubbornness, for one. You don't give up. That's worth more than cooking or sewing. He went back to the dress. And you're honest. You don't put on airs or pretend to be something you're not. In my experience, that's rarer than gold. Honesty won't save my ranch. No, but it might save your soul. Yates finished the mending and held up the dress. The tear was completely invisible. There, good as new. Theresa took the dress, their fingers brushing. The touch sent a jolt through her that she felt all the way to her toes. Thank you, she said. My pleasure, Yates said, and their eyes met and held. The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. Theresa wanted to say something, anything, but her tongue felt thick and clumsy in her mouth. Finally, Yates cleared his throat and stood. I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. Yes, Theresa said. Of course. He lingered in the doorway for a moment, like he wanted to say something more, then nodded and left. Theresa sat holding her mended dress and wondering when exactly everything had changed. The next morning, Yates saddled up before dawn. Theresa had risen early to make him breakfast, and for once she'd managed not to burn anything. The eggs were actually edible and the coffee was strong and hot. They ate in companionable silence, both aware that this was goodbye, at least for a while. The drive should take about 6 weeks if the weather holds, Yates said. That'll put me back here right before your week is up. I should have enough money to at least buy more time with the creditors. What if something happens to you? Theresa asked. She couldn't help it. The thought of him leaving filled her with an anxiety she didn't want to examine too closely. I'll be careful, Yates said. I've done drives before. I know how to handle myself. Promise me, Theresa said urgently. Promise me you'll come back. Yates reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough and warm. I promise, he said, looking into her eyes. I'm coming back, Theresa, to you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Theresa felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Yates, you don't have to say anything, Yates said gently. I just wanted you to know. He stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her up with him. For a moment they stood face to face, close enough that Theresa could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Then, slowly, giving her time to pull away, Yates leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, and it made Theresa's whole body sing. She kissed him back, rising up on her toes, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Yates rested his forehead against hers. That's something to come back to, he said quietly. Then you'd better come back, Theresa said, trying to sound stern but failing completely. Yates smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Yes, madam. He left a few minutes later, riding out as the sun was just starting to paint the eastern sky pink. Theresa stood on the porch and watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she went inside and touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. The weeks that followed were the longest of Theresa's life. She threw herself into work, tending the cattle, maintaining the property, trying to keep everything going on her own. It was brutally hard. She understood now just how much Yates had been doing, all the little tasks that kept a ranch running. She fell into bed exhausted every night and woke before dawn to start again. The creditors came back at the end of the first week, demanding their money. Theresa met them on the porch again, this time alone, and told them she was consulting with lawyers and they'd have their answer soon. It was a bluff, but she delivered it with enough confidence that they backed off, though they promised to return. 3 weeks in, one of the cattle got sick. Theresa had no idea what to do. She tried everything she could think of, following vague memories of watching her father tend sick animals, but the cow got worse. In desperation, she rode into Hangtown and found the town doctor, who sometimes treated animals when the need was great. I can't pay you much, Theresa said as he examined the cow. Your father was a good man, the doctor said. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and gnarled hands. He helped me when I first came to town, gave me credit when I needed it. I'll tend your animal for free and we'll call it even. Thank you, Theresa said, feeling tears prick her eyes. She'd been holding herself together so tightly for so long that any kindness threatened to break her. The doctor gave the cow some medicine and showed Theresa how to administer it. You're doing a good job here, young lady, he said as he was leaving. Don't let anyone tell you different. I'm not doing anything special, Theresa said, just surviving. Sometimes surviving is the most special thing we can do, the doctor said and rode away. 4 weeks in, Theresa was mending a fence when she heard riders approaching. Her heart leapt, thinking it might be Yates, but it was the creditors again. This time there were 5 of them and they weren't asking nicely. Time's up, the leader said. We want our money or we want this land. The debt hasn't been verified, Theresa said, though her hands were shaking. I have the right to contest it in court. You have the right to nothing, girl. This is our land now. You got until sunset to clear out or we'll clear you out. You can't do that. It's illegal. The leader laughed. Who's going to stop us? The sheriff is in our pocket. You're alone out here with no one to help you. Face facts. You lost. Theresa stood her ground even though fear was clawing at her insides. I won't leave. Then you'll regret it, the leader said and signaled his men to dismount. That was when a gunshot cracked across the yard, kicking up dust at the leader's feet. Everyone froze. The lady said no, came a familiar voice, and Theresa's heart soared. Yates rode over the ridge, leading a string of horses behind him. He looked thinner than when he'd left, weathered and trail-worn, but his eyes were as steady as ever and his gun was in his hand. You're back, Theresa breathed. Told you I would be, Yates said, not taking his eyes off the creditors. Now, gentlemen, I believe Miss Zimmerman asked you to leave. This doesn't concern you, the leader snarled. Everything concerning Miss Zimmerman concerns me, Yates said, and I have the money to pay off her father's debt, legal and proper. $2,000 cash, so whatever claim you think you have on this land just evaporated. You're lying. Try me. Yates dismounted and walked forward, radiating a kind of controlled danger that made even the armed men take a step back. I made good money on that drive, and I saved every penny. Now you can take the money and go, or you can try to take this land by force and see what happens. Your choice. The leader looked at Yates, looked at Theresa, and then at his men. Whatever he saw in their faces made him think better of it. Fine, he spat, but this better be real money. It's real, Yates said. Come back tomorrow with proper paperwork showing the debt, and I'll pay you in front of witnesses. Legal and binding. Then you leave Miss Zimmerman alone for good. The men grumbled but agreed. They mounted up and rode off, casting dark looks over their shoulders. As soon as they were out of sight, Theresa ran to Yates and threw herself into his arms. He caught her and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. You're back, she said again, unable to believe it. You're really back. Told you I'd come back to you, Yates said. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away. Theresa pulled back to look at him, taking in the new lines around his eyes, the healing cut on his cheek, the way he favored his left side slightly. You're hurt. Just banged up, nothing serious. Yates cupped her face in his hands. God, I missed you. Every day on that trail, all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you. I missed you too, Theresa said. So much. I didn't realize how much until you were gone. Theresa, Yates said, and the way he said her name made her heart skip. These past weeks made me realize something. I've been drifting for years, never putting down roots, never letting myself care too much about anything. But you changed that. You made me want to stay. You made me want to build something real. What are you saying? Theresa asked, though hope was blooming in her chest like a wildflower. I'm saying I love you, Yates said simply. I love your stubbornness and your honesty and the way you keep fighting even when everything is against you. I love that you make me want to be better. I love you, Theresa Zimmerman, and if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Tears were streaming down Theresa's face now. I love you too, she said. I think I started loving you the day you calmed that horse, or maybe the day you mended my dress, or maybe the very first day when you offered to help. I don't know when it happened, but I know it's true. I love you, Yates Jackson. Yates kissed her then, and it was nothing like that first gentle kiss. This was passionate and desperate, the kiss of two people who'd been apart too long and couldn't bear another moment of distance. Theresa kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and relief and love into it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. Marry me, Yates said, right now, today, as soon as we can get a preacher out here. Yes, Theresa said without hesitation. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 3 days later in the ranch house, with the doctor and a few neighbors as witnesses. Theresa wore the dress Yates had mended, because it felt right somehow. wearing something he'd fixed with his own hands. Yates wore clean trail clothes and looked more handsome than any man had a right to be. The preacher said the words, and they promised to love and honor each other until death parted them. And when Yates kissed his bride, Theresa felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The creditors came the next day with their paperwork, looking sour. Yates paid them the $2,000 in front of witnesses, and they signed documents transferring all claims on the property. The ranch was free and clear, fully in Theresa's name, or rather in her married name now, Theresa Jackson. "What do we do now?" Theresa asked as they watched the creditors ride away for the last time. "We build a life," Yates said, "together," and they did. It wasn't easy. The ranch still needed constant work, and money was tight for the first few years. But they worked side by side, Yates teaching Theresa about cattle and horses, Theresa slowly learning to cook and manage the household accounts. She never became an expert at domestic tasks, but she got good enough, and Yates never complained. He said he'd married her for her strength and honesty, not her biscuits, and if he had to eat a few burnt meals, that was a small price to pay for a lifetime with the woman he loved. Theresa discovered she had a talent for breeding horses. The mean gelding, Satan, responded to her the way he'd once responded to Yates, and she found she had a gentle touch with difficult animals. She started small, breeding horses and training them, and within a few years, Jackson Ranch became known for producing the finest horses in the region. People came from as far away as Sacramento to buy her stock. See, Yates said one evening as they watched a mare and foal in the paddock, the foal's coat gleaming copper in the sunset. "I told you that you had talents. You just needed to find them." "I found more than talents," Theresa said, leaning against him. "I found purpose. I found home. I found you." "And I found you," Yates said, wrapping his arms around her. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Their first child came 2 years after they were married, a son they named Thomas after Theresa's father. He was a healthy, squalling baby with Yates's brown eyes and Theresa's stubborn chin. Theresa took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, and if she wasn't a natural at it, she learned. Yates was a devoted father, patient and kind, teaching Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk. 2 years later came a daughter they named Lily, with her mother's brown hair and her father's gentle nature. She was a sweet child, always laughing, always curious about everything. Theresa watched her children grow with a fierce love that sometimes frightened her with its intensity. She'd gone from having nothing and no one to having everything that mattered. The ranch prospered. Yates proved to be as good at business as he was at ranching, and Theresa's horse breeding operation brought in steady income. They hired hands to help with the work, treating them fairly and paying them well, the way Theresa's father had once treated Yates. Word spread, and Jackson Ranch became known as a good place to work. 10 years after their marriage, Theresa stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Yates teach Thomas to rope while Lily played with a litter of puppies in the yard. A third child, another son named Henry, napped inside. The ranch that had once been falling apart now thrived, with a new barn, expanded pastures, and a house that no longer leaked when it rained. Sometimes Theresa thought about that day when Yates had first ridden up to her father's grave, offering help when she had nothing to give in return. She thought about how certain she'd been that she had no talents, no worth, nothing to offer the world, how wrong she'd been. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, coming up to the porch and wrapping an arm around her waist. He still made her heart skip, even after all these years. "About talents," Theresa said. "About that day you told me I was talented at making you want to be better." "You still are," Yates said, kissing her temple. "Every single day." You make me better too, Theresa said. You made me see that I didn't need to be good at what everyone else valued. You helped me find my own path. We helped each other, Yates said. That's what love is, I think, making each other better, making each other whole. Theresa turned in his arms and kissed him, still feeling that same spark she'd felt the very first time. I love you, Yates Jackson. I love you too, Theresa Jackson, he said. Always have, always will. Their children's laughter rang out across the yard, mixing with the sounds of horses whinnying and cattle lowing in the distance. The sun was setting over the California hills, painting everything gold and amber. Somewhere in Hangtown, life went on, people going about their business, pursuing their own dreams and struggles. But here on Jackson Ranch, Theresa had everything she needed. She thought about the girl she'd been, standing over her father's grave, convinced she was alone and useless. That girl seemed like a stranger now. Theresa had learned that strength came in many forms, and talent wasn't always about cooking perfect meals or sewing straight seams. Sometimes talent was about endurance, about love, about choosing to keep fighting when everything seemed lost. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, talent was about finding the one person who saw you for who you truly were and loved you for it, who made you want to be better and never stopped believing you could be. Come on, Yates said, tugging her hand. Kids are getting hungry. Time to burn some supper. Theresa laughed and swatted his arm. My cooking has gotten better and you know it. It has, Yates agreed, grinning. But I'd have eaten charcoal every day if it meant I got to be with you. Sentimental fool, Theresa said fondly. You're sentimental fool, Yates corrected. They walked into the house together, hand in hand, and Theresa felt a profound sense of peace. This was home. This was family. This was love. Years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a strong young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's determination. He took naturally to ranch work and to horse breeding, learning everything Theresa could teach him. Lily turned out to have a gift for numbers, managing the ranch's books with an ease that amazed both her parents. Henry, the youngest, was the dreamer of the family, always sketching the animals and landscapes around him, capturing the beauty of their world on paper. When Thomas was 20, he married a girl from town named Sarah, a practical young woman with a quick smile and a good head for business. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and within a year, they gave Theresa and Yates their first grandchild, a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes. Holding that baby in her arms, Theresa marveled at how far she'd come. From a woman alone with nothing to a grandmother surrounded by family. What would you tell her? Yates asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set as they had 1,000 times before. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work. But their love had only deepened with time. Tell who? Theresa asked. That girl standing at her father's grave thinking she had nothing, Yates said. If you could go back and tell her one thing, what would it be? Theresa thought about it, rocking gently in her chair. I'd tell her that she's stronger than she knows, she said finally. That the talents that matter most aren't the ones other people value. I'd tell her to hold on because something amazing is coming. Someone amazing. You tell her about me, Yates asked, a teasing note in his voice. I'd tell her about us, Theresa corrected. About what we'd build together, about the family we'd create and the life we'd share. I'd tell her that feeling lost doesn't mean you are lost. Sometimes it just means you haven't found your path yet. Think she'd believe you? Yates asked. Probably not, Theresa said with a smile. I was pretty stubborn back then. You're still pretty stubborn, Yates pointed out. True. But now I have you to be stubborn alongside me. Yates reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Best decision I ever made, riding up to that ranch all those years ago. Best decision I ever made was letting you stay," Theresa said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The ranch was quiet except for the usual evening sounds: horses moving in their stalls, cattle settling for the night, the distant call of an owl. Inside the house, they could hear Lily helping with dinner preparations while Henry read to his younger niece. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. "Do you ever regret it?" Yates asked suddenly. "Not marrying someone more conventional? Someone who could have given you an easier life?" Theresa looked at him in genuine surprise. "How could I regret this? You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. You showed me who I really was. Easy isn't always better, Yates. Sometimes the hard things are the ones worth having." "I just want to make sure you're happy," Yates said, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that made Theresa's heart ache. She squeezed his hand. "I am happy. Deliriously, completely, utterly happy. Are you?" "Every single day," Yates said, "even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, because I get to face them with you." More years passed. Lily married a schoolteacher and moved to Sacramento, though she visited often with her growing family. Henry eventually sold some of his artwork and became modestly successful, though he always came home to the ranch to paint. Thomas and Sarah expanded their part of the operation, and their children, 3 in total, grew up running wild across the same land their grandparents had saved together. When Theresa was 60, she and Yates took a trip to San Francisco, something they'd always talked about but never done. They stayed in a fancy hotel and ate at restaurants and saw all the sights like a couple of tourists. It was strange being in the city, surrounded by noise and crowds and buildings that blocked out the sky. But it was also wonderful, experiencing something new together after so many years. On their last night in the city, they walked along the waterfront, watching the ships in the harbor. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I hadn't come back that day?" Yates asked. "I'd have lost the ranch," Theresa said. "Probably would have ended up working as a seamstress or a laundress, barely scraping by. Alone. I'd have kept drifting," Yates said. "Working different ranches, different towns, never belonging anywhere. Alone." "We saved each other," Theresa said, leaning against him. "We did," Yates agreed. "You know what the funny thing is? I almost didn't come back that day. I heard about your father in town, and my first instinct was to keep riding. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I'd paid whatever debt I owed by working those silver mines and making something of myself. But something made me turn my horse around. Something told me I needed to be there." "Fate," Theresa said, "or luck, or just dumb stubbornness." Yates smiled. "Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every day." They returned to the ranch the next week, and Theresa was surprised by how good it felt to be home. The city had been exciting, but this was where she belonged. Where they both belonged. Life continued its steady rhythm. Seasons changed, years passed, children grew and had children of their own. Theresa and Yates grew older together, their bodies slowing but their spirits remaining strong. They still worked the ranch, though they left more of the heavy labor to their children and grandchildren now. They spent their evenings on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, reflecting on the life they'd built. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard with noise and laughter. There was food and music and dancing, and Theresa looked around at all these people, this family that existed because she'd taken a chance on a stranger with kind eyes all those years ago. Speech. Someone called out, and everyone took up the chant until Theresa and Yates had no choice but to stand up. "I'm not good at speeches," Theresa said, and everyone laughed because it was true. "But I want to say something. When I was young, I thought I had to be good at certain things to have value. I thought because I couldn't cook or sew or charm people, I was worthless. But this man," she gestured to Yates, "he taught me that worth isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's about being true to yourself and working hard and loving deeply. He taught me that my real talent was perseverance, stubbornness maybe, but also love, the ability to love through hard times and good times alike." She paused, looking at Yates, who had tears in his eyes. "40 years ago I was lost and alone. Today I have all of you. I have this life, this family, this love. And it all started because one man saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. So thank you, Yates, for everything, for being my partner, my love, my home." The crowd erupted in applause, but Theresa only had eyes for Yates, who pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for letting me stay," he whispered. "Thank you for building this life with me." "Always," Theresa whispered back. "Always and forever." As the party continued around them, Theresa reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't always been easy. There had been droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and failed crops, arguments and misunderstandings, and all the normal struggles of life. But through it all, they'd had each other. They'd faced every challenge as partners, supporting each other, believing in each other, making each other better. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Theresa and Yates sat on the porch one more time. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air was warm and sweet with the scent of hay and horses, and everything was perfect. "Do you remember what you said to me that first week?" Theresa asked. "About me being talented at making you want to be better." "I remember," Yates said. "You were right," Theresa said. "But it went both ways. You made me want to be better too. You made me want to find my strength, to discover what I was capable of. You gave me the courage to become who I was meant to be." "We did it together," Yates said. "Everything worth doing we did together." "Together," Theresa echoed, and it sounded like a promise, like a prayer, like a benediction on a life well lived and a love that would endure. They sat there in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to their hard work and dedication. The house behind them was filled with sleeping children and grandchildren, a testament to their love. And ahead of them, whatever years remained, they would face together as they always had. Theresa closed her eyes and breathed in the night air, feeling utterly content. She'd started with nothing and ended with everything. She'd believed she had no talents and discovered she had the greatest talent of all, the ability to love and be loved, to persevere and to hope, to build something lasting from nothing but determination and faith. "I love you," she said to Yates, because even after 40 years the words never got old. "I love you too," Yates said and kissed her hand, "until my last breath and beyond." And as they sat together under the stars, Theresa knew that no matter what came next, they would face it the way they'd faced everything. Together, with courage and love and the unshakable belief that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The years continued to be kind to them. Yates remained healthy and strong well into his 60s, still working the ranch alongside Thomas and the younger generation. Theresa's horse breeding operation had become legendary throughout California, and people spoke of Jackson Ranch with respect and admiration. They'd built not just a successful business but a legacy. When Theresa turned 65, she finally taught herself to cook properly. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She took lessons from Lily and from Sarah, and she practiced until her biscuits were light and fluffy, and her stews were rich and savory. The first time she served Yates a perfectly cooked meal, he made a big show of checking for signs of the apocalypse, which made her laugh until she cried. "I can't believe it only took me 40-some years to figure this out," Theresa said, watching him eat with genuine enjoyment. "You figured it out when you were ready to," Yates said. "That's how you do everything. On your own time in your own way. It's one of the things I love about you." But life wasn't all sunshine and gentle evenings. When Theresa was 68, she fell ill with a fever that left her bedridden for weeks. Yates never left her side, nursing her with the same patient devotion he'd shown to everything in their life together. He brought her water and broth, read to her when she was too weak to read for herself, and held her hand through the worst of it. "You're not allowed to leave me," he said one night when her fever was at its highest. "You hear me, Theresa Jackson? We have a deal, together until the end." "You don't get to break that deal." "Not planning on it," Theresa managed to whisper. "Too stubborn to die." She recovered slowly but surely, and by spring she was back on her feet, thinner and weaker but alive. Yates had aged visibly during her illness, new lines carved deep into his face, and Theresa realized with a start that they were truly old now. Not just older, but genuinely elderly. It was a strange realization, looking in the mirror and seeing a woman with white hair and wrinkled skin, when inside she still felt like that 22-year-old girl standing at her father's grave. "Where did the time go?" she asked Yates one evening. "Into this," he said, gesturing around them at the ranch, at the family photos on the walls, at the life they'd created. "Into living, into loving. I wouldn't change a minute of it. Not even the hard parts," Theresa asked. "Especially not the hard parts," Yates said. "The hard parts made us who we are. They made us strong. They made us appreciate the good parts all the more." When Theresa was 70, she and Yates made the decision to officially hand over the ranch operations to Thomas and Sarah. It was time. They were too old to handle the day-to-day work, and their son and daughter-in-law had more than proven themselves capable. But Theresa and Yates didn't leave. This was their home, and they'd die here together when their time came. They spent their days doing lighter work, puttering around the property, spending time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Theresa still kept a hand in the horse breeding, though now she mostly just advised. Yates still checked on the cattle every morning, though Thomas accompanied him now, just to make sure he didn't overdo it. "I never thanked you properly," Theresa said one evening. They were in their usual spot on the porch, watching their great-granddaughter play in the yard. "For what?" Yates asked. "For seeing me," Theresa said. "For seeing who I really was when I couldn't see it myself. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For loving me exactly as I was." "Theresa," Yates said gently, taking her hand. "That's what love is. Seeing someone completely and loving them not despite who they are, but because of who they are. You did the same for me. You saw a drifter with a rough past and you gave me a home. You gave me purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Theresa said. "That's the real talent, isn't it? Not cooking or ranching or breeding horses. The real talent is loving someone so completely that you make each other better. You make each other whole." "That's what I said on day one," Yates reminded her with a smile. "You're talented at making me want to be better." "And you're talented at making me believe I can be," Theresa said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set one more time. How many sunsets had they watched from this porch? Thousands, probably. Tens of thousands. Each one unique, each one beautiful, each one a gift. Yates was 73 when his heart finally gave out. It happened quietly, peacefully, in his sleep. He went to bed one night holding Theresa's hand and simply didn't wake up the next morning. Theresa woke to find him still beside her, a slight smile on his face, looking more peaceful than she'd ever seen him. The grief was overwhelming. After 51 years of marriage, 51 years of partnership and love and shared life, half of her soul was simply gone. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of California. Yates had touched so many lives, helped so many people, been such a steady, kind presence in the community. But Theresa barely noticed any of it. She moved through the day in a haze, accepting condolences she couldn't really hear, supported by her children who were dealing with their own grief. In the weeks that followed, Theresa struggled. She'd never been alone, not really. She'd gone from her father's house to sharing her life with Yates, and now, for the first time in her 73 years, she was truly by herself. The house felt too big, too empty. The bed was cold without him beside her. She kept turning to say something to him, only to remember he wasn't there. But slowly, painfully, she learned to live with the grief. It never went away, but it became bearable. She found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the ranch that she and Yates had built together, in the memories of their life together. She started writing things down, stories about their years together, lessons they'd learned, wisdom she wanted to pass on to future generations. One evening, 6 months after Yates's death, Theresa sat on the porch alone watching the sunset. She'd brought out 2 rocking chairs out of habit, and now one sat empty beside her. She looked at it and felt the familiar ache in her chest, but also something else. Gratitude. Deep, profound gratitude for the life they'd shared. "We did it," she said out loud, talking to Yates as if he could hear her. "We built something beautiful, didn't we? We took nothing and made everything. We found love when we weren't even looking for it, and we made it last a lifetime. Thank you for that. Thank you for every moment, every day, every year. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for making me want to be better." The wind rustled through the trees, and Theresa liked to imagine it was Yates answering her, telling her he loved her too, telling her he'd wait for her when her time came. She lived for another 5 years, surrounded by love and family. She got to meet more great-grandchildren, got to see the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's guidance, got to watch her family grow and thrive. She spent her days doing the things she loved, working with horses, writing in her journal, telling stories to the younger generation about the grandfather they'd lost. When she was 78, she knew her time was coming. She could feel it in her bones, a weariness that went deeper than mere age. She gathered her children around her and gave them her final instructions, her final wisdom. "Love each other," she told them. "Support each other. Work hard, but don't forget to live. And remember that your worth isn't measured by what others think you should be good at. It's measured by your character, your kindness, your ability to persevere. Find your own talents, whatever they may be, and don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough." She paused, looking at each of their faces. "Your father taught me that. He saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. He made me want to be better, and in doing so, he made me discover who I really was. That's the greatest gift anyone can give. Give that gift to each other, to your children. To everyone you meet, see people for who they truly are and help them become who they're meant to be." Thomas was crying openly now, and even stoic Sarah had tears in her eyes. "We love you, Mama," Thomas said. "I love you too," Theresa said. "All of you. You're my greatest accomplishment, my greatest joy. You and your father, you're everything I could have ever wanted." That night, Theresa went to bed feeling at peace. She'd lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and purpose. She'd started with nothing and built everything. She'd found her talents, discovered her worth, created a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. She dreamed of Yates that night. He was young again, the way he'd looked when he first rode up to her father's ranch all those years ago. He smiled at her and held out his hand. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Theresa said, and took his hand. She died peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face, looking as peaceful as Yates had all those years before. Her children found her in the morning and wept, but they also celebrated, because they knew she'd lived exactly the life she wanted. She'd loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. She'd built something lasting. She'd found her purpose. They buried her next to Yates on the hill overlooking the ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Theresa Jackson, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She taught us all that true talent lies in perseverance, love, and the courage to become who you're meant to be. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through generations, each one adding to the legacy that Theresa and Yates had started. The story of their love became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, and that true love has the power to transform everything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right, people swear they can see two figures on the porch of the old ranch house, sitting in rocking chairs, holding hands, watching the sunset together one more time. It's probably just a trick of the light or imagination or wishful thinking. But maybe, just maybe, it's Theresa and Yates, still together after all these years, still making each other better, still proving that true love never really ends. It just transforms into something eternal, something that lives on in the hearts and memories of everyone they touched, in the legacy they built, in the family they created, in the love that continues to ripple outward through time, making the world a little bit better, one generation at a time. Because that was their real talent in the end, not ranching or horse breeding or even surviving against impossible odds. Their real talent was love, the kind of love that sees clearly, that believes completely, that endures forever. The kind of love that makes you want to be better and in doing so helps you discover that you were always enough, exactly as you are. And that is a talent worth having, a legacy worth leaving, a love story worth telling again and again for all the years to come.